Hi, everyone.
Hi again. We are in Matthew 23, verses 13 to 33. We'll share it because it's a lengthy reading, and Vivian has the NIV, I have the ESV.
Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the kingdom of heaven in men's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are. Woe to you, blind guides! You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath. You blind fools! Which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift on it, he is bound by his oath. You blind men! Which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And he who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. Oh, I'm still reading one more. Okay, sorry. And he who swears by heaven swears by God's throne, by the one who sits on it.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides, straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they're full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the plate, that the outside also may be clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you build the tombs of the prophets, and decorate the monuments of the righteous, saying, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. Thus you witness against yourselves that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your fathers, you serpents, you brood of vipers. How are you to escape being sentenced to hell? Whoa. So when we read it over, of course, we saw right away the parallel with our own situation as witnesses. We're very preoccupied as witnesses with the outward show, the outward religion. We do things differently than everybody else does outwardly. And of course, we know that promotions in the Watchtower, elevation within the organization itself, depends on those outward performances. You never have a character checkup. No,
it doesn't seem to. It doesn't seem to be a concern to them, or at least they don't make you aware of it. That you should be working on your inward person, on how you treat people, on how you, if you're considerate or condescending, those things, because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, going to the meetings and going out in field service and
putting in a report.
Yeah, being an elder or a ministerial servant, achieving those things are what matter to them, rather than the change in a person.
And of course, we didn't think of ourselves as hypocrites. No. We were doing the things that were expected of us by Jehovah and his organization.
It's the training that you receive.
But the hypocrisy of it is far more visible now that we know the loyalty to the organization trumps all other considerations, so that in the child abuse issues that are apparently all over the world, loyalty to the elder arrangement, loyalty to the theocratic structure of the organization, keeping files private. All that stuff is just the very kind of thing that you read about here, that the outside of the cup and the inside of the cup, and the beautiful tombs that cover dead men's bones.
Yeah. So if your attitude is wrong, I mean, it does show up. It shows up in your relationships with other people.
Yeah.
You were mentioning that when you were first downtown, I guess, pioneering, or when you were first pioneering, you noticed that kind of attitude within the young pioneers that you were working with, and it kind of bothered you.
Even 10 years before that, I must admit, I had cognitive dissonance. The very first times I started auxiliary pioneering back in, I guess I was just baptized at the time, it's probably 71 or 72, going door to door with teenage boys, who were 2-3 years younger than me, and noticing their attitude, which was so condescending to the people out there. Not just when we talked among ourselves while going from door to door or in the car on the way to this territory, but the attitude that was condescending, which very frequently came out of their mouths when they were talking to people. And I thought to myself then, well, they're young. But the point was, they're being used as missionaries.
Yeah.
They're at the front, and this is what people pick up on it. The attitude of many. And then later on, of course, I realized it wasn't limited to teenagers. A lot of the older veterans had the same kind of hostility.
Once you accept you have the truth and you don't need to learn anything, you're going to be condescending to other people.
Yeah.
You're going to start to elevate yourself as being in the right group with the right ideas.
And yet all those young men around me, and young women too, many of whom had similar attitudes, if a little softer, were elevated. They became ministerial servants, they became full-time pioneers, and then they became elders and ministerial servants and elders.
And you're made to feel good about those things, but you're never checked on the attitude. What attitude do you hold?
And those attitudes, as we've noted in other videos, get hardened with time.
Yeah.
You don't soften and become more sympathetic as the years of waiting for Armageddon go by. You harden just as these men hardened in their hypocrisy as they got older. And there was no breaking them after a while. They had to be broken by, well, we know, by judgment. Here's what Ryle has to say. We have in these verses the charges of our Lord against the Jewish teachers ranged under 8 heads. Standing in the midst of the temple with a listening crowd around him, he publicly denounces the main errors of the scribes and Pharisees in unsparing terms. 8 times he uses the solemn expression, "Woe unto you." 7 times he calls them hypocrites. Twice he speaks of them as blind guides. Twice as fools and blind. Once as serpents in a generation of vipers. Let us mark that language well. It teaches a solemn lesson. It shows how utterly abominable the spirit of the scribes and Pharisees is in God's sight, in whatever form it may be found. Let us glance shortly at the 8 charges which our Lord brings forward, and then seek to draw from the whole passage some general instruction. The first woe in the list is directed against the systematic opposition of the scribes and Pharisees to the progress of the gospel. They shut up the kingdom of heaven. They would neither go in themselves nor suffer others to go in. They rejected the warning voice of John the Baptist. They refused to acknowledge Jesus when he appeared among them as the Messiah. They tried to keep back Jewish inquirers. They would not believe the gospel themselves, and they did all in their power to prevent others believing it. This was a great sin.
The second woe in the list is directed against the covetous and self-grandizing spirit of the scribes and Pharisees. They devoured widows' houses and for a pretense made long prayer. They imposed on the credulity of weak and unprotected women by an affectation of great devoutness until they were regarded as their spiritual directors. They scrupled not to abuse the influence thus unrighteously obtained to their own temporal advantage, and in a word, to make money by their religion. This again was a great sin. The third woe in the list is directed against the zeal of the scribes and Pharisees for making partisans. They compassed sea and land to make one proselyte. They labored incessantly to make men join their party and adopt their opinions. They did this from no desire to benefit men's souls in the least, or to bring them to God. They only did it to swell the ranks of their sect, and to increase the number of their adherents, and their own importance. Their religious zeal rose from sectarianism, and not from the love of God. This also was a great sin. The fourth woe in the list is directed against the doctrines of the scribes and Pharisees about oaths. They drew subtle distinctions between one kind of oath and another. They taught the okay, you're going to have to say that one.
Jesuitical?
Okay.
Okay.
Tenet. That some oaths were binding on men, while others were not. They attached greater importance to oaths sworn by the gold offered to the temple than the oaths sworn by the temple itself. By so doing, they brought the third commandment into contempt, and by making men overrate the values of alms and oblations, advanced their own interest. This again was a great sin.
Well, that's the first four woes, and then we'll take up four more in the next section. This is a long chapter, so we'll break it in half. We wanted to link to two videos, both of which are Ray Franz, I believe. One of them is called J.W. Org Hypocrisy. That is that they praise the public trials in their publications. They praise the ancient Jewish tradition of public trials in their publications, but of course pursue a completely opposite course in practice. And the other one, also Ray Franz, is that they whitewash self while painting all others as black. How is it that there's so little praise, commendation of other religious movements within Watchtower publications? Well, it is in the effort, of course, to make themselves look good by comparison. So those two Ray Franz videos we'll put up as links.